Okay, hello everybody. A warm welcome to you. It's the morning for me. I think it's late at night for some of you, but a warm welcome to this session with Jane Kise and Anne Home. Thank you so much for joining us, Jane and Anne. We appreciate your expertise. Jane and Anne have been good friends of mine for many years and have been involved with BAPT for, oh, I wouldn't even like to count the years, many years indeed. You've been speakers at our conferences for a long time. Jane is the author of at least 25 books. You probably added a few more by then. And Jane and Anne have co-authored a book also together. And Anne is a master practitioner. So we're very much looking forward to all of your expertise. And the topic for the day is personality type, PQ. Um, PQ plus type equals EQ. And this is a wonderful topic for me, particularly because I looked at positive intelligence about 7 years ago, and I was totally amazed at how it can be so calming once you understand what your saboteurs are. And so it was hugely impactful on me. And so I'm really looking forward to your wisdom, Anne and Jane, on this and how we can match this. So thank you indeed. And please, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. Positive intelligence, Anne introduced it to me about 10 years ago, and it's one of the easiest to understand frameworks that we've ever used in coaching. And then in 2020, March to be exact, some colleagues of ours learned that the founder of positive intelligence was offering his first certification program to coaches. And so we started the program on March 8th, 2020. And of course, the world locked down about March 13th. So here we were going through an intensive 6 week learn how to coach yourself with daily practice on these saboteurs, locked down with the people we care most about. And it was very good practice, and we saw the value of it, all six of us as coaches. And it was just a great experience. So, we were already been using it and then got to go deep. And that really being who we are, we had already been doing research on, well, what saboteurs, and we'll explain this in a second, people with different types have. And so we had that information. And Shirzad Chamine, the founder, again, of Positive Intelligence, talked about how if you really understand your saboteurs, you can work on your emotional intelligence because it encompasses what you need to do to be self-aware and be able to self-manage and understand emotions in others and help them manage, which is really the core of emotional intelligence. And then that with personality type, we found putting the two together helped explain so many of the variations within a single type. And so it's just become one of our favorite things to do together with clients is to do both. And if you're not familiar with positive intelligence, we will do a quick it's one of those things that's intuitive enough that you can catch on through the names of the different things. And I'm just waiting till I can turn my slides to play, getting things out of the way. Stop pulling up bubbles. Here we go. So type plus PQ equals EQ is Anne's in my little equation for this. And, when we look at Carl Jung, this is, the quote basically says there's something innate about type. If you have two children in the same family, even though they've been raised similarly, they aren't the same. So there's something that is natural. The factor must be looked for in the disposition of the child. It's a nature thing. In Carl Jung, our psychological types. And of course, we've got quite a bit of research that shows that these preferences are available. I could tell my one child was extroverted and one child was introverted before they were even born by how much they moved. And in contrast, Shirzad Chamine's book on positive intelligence, his first formal publication on this, talks about how there's strategies that we develop in childhood in order to take care of survive the threats. He talks about independence, acceptance, and security. These are the core needs of being autonomous, mastering things, feeling safe, feeling like you belong. And so we develop these as children, no matter how healthy our childhood is. But when we keep using them as adults, and we all do, it's just not attractive. It's not effective. So we've got basically through these two frameworks, we're describing a nature and nurture piece that is very visible. Even though there's a lot of work to be done to truly understand them, we can see them in ourselves and in other people. So the two meld well just in that nature nurture bit. And what's emotional intelligence? Well, Daniel Goleman kind of popularized it, even though the concepts have been around for a long time. And he talks about it as the capacity for recognizing our own feelings and those of others, for motivating ourselves, for managing emotions well in ourselves and in our relationships. So, an all-encompassing, what do we do with emotions? And of course, a lot of tools talk about, yeah, and this goes into what do we do during stress? How well do we manage things during stress? The good times and the bads with our emotions. I've got a picture of Uluru Ayers Rock in Australia because there are characteristics that are similar with why emotional intelligence. And, I think we're all pretty familiar with how important EQ really is, emotional intelligence. The research coming out of the Center for Creative Leadership here in the United States, with its branch in Belgium, according to research, only about 30% of a leader's success is due to their IQ, their smarts, their knowledge. And the research shows that the other 70% of what sets off a leader as an excellent leader is their emotional intelligence. Just like about 70% of Uluru is underground. So it's a good thought of, you see the IQ more than you see the EQ and some, well, you see them both, but um, we tend to think of the smarts as what runs leadership, and it's really got at least as much to do with that emotional intelligence factor. So we're bringing all these together in this session, and what we want to do is use a really good example of everything. And since we don't even with personality type, we don't like picking on people that are still alive. We found that looking at Steve Jobs is an interesting case study. This brilliant, brilliant leader who actually got dismissed from the company that he founded because of his problems with relationships. And looking at his blend of EQ, IQ, and saboteurs, because he is, he became the leader of the decade, was, what Time Magazine called him. And he really knew how to motivate people to a certain extent. When he brought John Scully, who'd been CEO of the Pepsi-Cola company, over to Apple, he recruited him by asking the question, do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world? And Steve did motivate people at Apple with the idea of making a dent in the universe. He did know how to motivate. But if you look at his trajectory of the career, he was also a leadership professor's nightmare, as far as what he did as a leader and how he acted. And it's a slippery slope from good to bad. We know that we know the characteristics of good leaders. And when you put type and EQ together, um, one of the things we know is, and compare it to how Steve Jobs led, a good leader inspires purpose. Steve Jobs is on record for grabbing the credit in different things he worked on, even when he wasn't at the hub of what went on. And a lot of our two main information sources are Wikipedia, which of course is edited by people who care about the century, but even more so, the biography by Walter Isaacs on Steve Jobs that Steve authorized and had a lot of input to. And so these are factors on the Steve side, they're things that they said about him. Um, a good leader provides individual support to those right under him. Steve turned that into micromanaging to the point where people just shuddered when he came onto the floor at Apple and looked at what was going on because he was so into managing the details. A good leader develops an atmosphere of trust, and Steve developed an atmosphere of fear. People were actually afraid of him. And a good leader also models self-care. Ann and I have done a lot of work at looking at what true self-care looks like and what factors get in the way. And Steve actually screamed and cried in meetings and showed almost the opposite, just not even having the capacity to hold his own self together in his early years at Apple. And on the right is what you see in his first iteration as a CEO. And of course, he was fired and came back. And Steve Wozniak, his founding partner, talked about, I judge people by how they are, how nice they are. And I was brought up to be nice. Steve Jobs had a lot of these questionable things, like some of my very best friends in Apple almost all of them said they would never, ever work for Steve Jobs again. And these were the people that worked for him in the 1990s. It was that bad. But he was young then, and Jobs learned from those early years. And his learning came from many, many things, including failure. Um, but there is this overall question as we look at leadership development, and this is, the Becoming Steve Jobs biographies of him. But he'd been so inconsistent, inconsiderate, rash, and wrong-headed that he was exiled from the company he founded, and he became a venerated CEO that people look at as a model. So what went on and all that? And that's what we want to talk about is a conjecture on his type, since we can do that since he's no longer with us. A look at what his saboteurs might be and some strategies he and therefore you could use to help PQ help you become more emotionally intelligent. And we wanted to just show you this slide. There are 9 saboteurs that Shirzad demonstrated. And you know, if we want to just pause for a minute and let you look at these. And I think when you see the words avoider or controller or hyperachiever or pleaser, you can recognize people that have these characteristics and almost use these as defense mechanisms. Victim has become an extremely popular one to hold in recent years. That the poor me, everyone's out to get me seems to be more common than it ever was, especially back when Anne was doing our research. Almost no one said they were a victim, and it's gotten more and more common as we've worked with this and also in other things. But um,
I
can
wanted to,
are there
I was
any
going to
questions?
point out,
Go ahead, Anne.
well, I just wanted to point out 2 things about this. So, looking at
Please.
this list, one of the things that we often do is we look at the list and we go, "Oh yeah, my husband must be the controller, and this person I know must be the restless." I might be a little bit of an avoider, but if you have to have a saboteur, this one's not so bad. Well, these are all equally unhelpful. And the 2 factors being we think we need them. And number 2, we're often seeing the downside or the true saboteur side when we're looking at somebody else. So it's an interesting thing about our saboteurs because they're very sneaky.
Yeah, and one of my top ones is a controller. My type preferences are INFJ, and a lot of INFJs are organized, and we take charge of things because we know things will get done, and that's the good side of it. The bad side is controlling everything, and as it says here, I'm doing everybody a favor by, having it done my way. And of course, that becomes unhealthy very quickly if you don't realize, uh-oh, I'm over controlling and need to step back. And that's how it works for every single one of these. They're often, they also embody some of our strengths, and yet overdone, they become very unattractive in adults, even though they aren't so terrible, maybe in a 2-year-old who's just trying to learn to be autonomous or feel like they belong or whatever it is. So does anyone have any questions or comments just as you look at the list of saboteurs?
Can they change throughout your lifetime, James? Is that common?
Well, we all have a little bit of each of these in us, and we tend to have a few that are more commonly occurring, but circumstances can certainly make one come out more than the other. So, yes, to the degree that you change equals a perspective of in the moment. But you typically do hang on to your top 2 or 3 as your go-to strategies, is how I would answer that question.
Well, I think too, Anne and I've talked about how when we're coaching someone, we will ask which one's getting in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And like one of my coaches said, my hypervigilant really is just in my personal life. I'm so concerned for my children and want, be my family to be safe. Um, and it's the pleaser at work that gets me in trouble because I want to be all things to all people. And when I'm asked to do something, I say yes. And he pictured himself as the little character of Piglet in Winnie the Pooh, who's always, I can help, I can help, I can help, and realized that he was taking on too much. And so in that particular case, he had to work on his pleaser if he was going to be a better leader. And so, and that's true almost always with emotional intelligence. We develop it, whatever piece of it we need, empathy or stress management or whatever piece in service to what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I wanted to add one more thing too. Oftentimes you want to look at what they look like in the aggregate. So if you are, for instance, your top ones are avoider and restless, you're going to get a certain sort of character with that versus if you're an avoider hyperachiever, where you might say, I don't want to even attempt or look stupid. I don't want that to be unpleasant. It'll just kind of work itself out, kind of a thing. So you look at them as they pair up or aggregate in sort of a character as well, as another way to look at them.
I found also that the top two can be quite opposite. It seems like they wouldn't be good bedfellows, but they actually kind of are, and you create your own story around it. So mine was hyperachiever pleaser. So you think, well, how does that work?
Yeah.
But my story around it makes it work for me, and I'm sure if others are looking at these and thinking of their top two, you just think, oh my goodness, that sits in me quite, unexpectedly. Those two things.
Yeah, and I have avoider restless, and sometimes I don't want to sit with the unpleasant reality, and so I want to generate more options, get more restless about finding more ways to look at something or to get me out of that unpleasant energy. They work kind of like a tag team almost.
Sure.
Now, hi, I'm curious, you must see a correlation with personality type with some of these styles. Is there?
What we have quite a bit of data. We've run correlations and chi-square and all kinds of great statistical things on just the type preferences. So you can guess that judging types are more likely to be controllers, for example. Thinking types are more likely to be hyper-rational. There aren't many surprises there. But when you look at which of the 16 types have which of the saboteurs, we found that some are very consistent. Like we had a dozen ISFJs in our database, and 11 of the 12 had pleaser. And I think it was almost as high for stickler with the ISFJs, which is no surprise. There are wonderful detail organizers, and they organize for people. That's kind of an SF definition. And the same with the ESFJs, very, very concentrated. When you look at something like the ENFPs, we had 24 in the database, and they were all over the place. And Anne's in my premise, although we didn't do depth interviews to know this for sure, is that ESFJ and ISFJ are very common types in Western society, and it's like those common types, their natural defense mechanisms are backed up by what society is asking them to be, so they're very consistent with their personality types. ENFPs are often, and how would you describe it? This is yours. There's no correlation. ENFPs were as likely to have any of the saboteurs as any other.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you're not necessarily the model
no.
type.
Well, I was going to say my daughter is an ENFP, and she is hyperachiever, restless, and controller. So, and those are not high on my stack. Hyperachiever a little bit, but my daughter is got completely different saboteurs, and she has an INTJ father who may have very well had a major impact on those saboteurs developing rather than sharing my saboteurs. So
it's a yes and no.
It's a yes and no. It really does depend on type. And again, the other thing is of course we all have some of this to some degree that'll come out under certain conditions. So,
and sometimes people can pinpoint what it was in childhood, good or bad. I mean, I grew up in a pretty functional family, but I've got 4 big brothers. And so in a way, I had 5 dads all telling me what to do. So it's no surprise that I developed controller to try and get a little bit of autonomy in my life. That's just one example. And so when we do day-long sessions, we'll have people talk about that. Like, do you have any idea where your saboteurs might have come from? Just as Anne talked about with her daughter, maybe the hyper-rational or hyperachiever is a little bit from the INTJ dad. So the nature nurture thing really rings true. But the most common types in a society tend to have the same pattern in the saboteurs is it's a hypothesis. We don't have a way to back it other than correlation isn't causation, but we can see the correlations.
And why do you think
Yeah.
that there's more of this victim style going on right now? Is it generational from social media? What do you think is causing that?
You
Well,
might be
right now,
right about those two factors.
go ahead, Anne.
For sure. No, I was going to say she might be right about those two factors. But in addition to that, Jane, you were going to add.
I'm just reading a book that talks about how cyclical it is. Like we've just come through a period where it's been harder for people who just got their college educations to get a job, and all of a sudden that turns into victimhood in a societal way, and then it dies off as people get reabsorbed into the job market, and then it comes back. And this is like, it's just really interesting looking at victimhood and what happens politically when that occurs. But we are not talking politics.
Oh, well, the other thing I was going to comment on is the mindset around safe, because there's probably more hypervigilant as well. But this idea that everything is unsafe, either all the way from just walking out your door to words being unsafe and words, creating some sort of violence. And so I think there's some societal influence in that as well. Lots of factors, but for sure you see a lot more of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the names of the saboteurs give a pretty good idea of what they are. And what we want to do with a chunk of time here, we are assuming that Steve Jobs was an intuitive thinker. We don't know anyone who worked with him to verify that. And Anne and I went back forth, being able to play with him being a few of the different NT types. So we decided to just say, let's assume he was an intuitive thinker and not try to get down on the weeds of which of those he was. Although you can have fun in your breakout group talking about that. We're pretty sure he was a stickler because of how his micromanagement, the stickler controller, seems pretty strong. And they have different, the stickler is there's one right way to do it, and I know the right way, whereas the controller is things go better if I'm in charge. So there's a different flavor to the two, and we've given in the handouts some detailed information on those two. We're pretty sure he was hyper rational too, just because of his interest, but we're concentrating on stickler and controller today. And we're going to give you a chance to get into a couple breakout rooms and look at some information we have on Steve in a few areas of his life and try a strategy. It's called accept or convert, and it's just a powerful coaching strategy that you'll be able to use after the session for yourself to look at how the positive intelligence framework can help you tap into your emotional intelligence strengths. So that's our plan. Steve's standing here with the iPhone in his iteration as a much more effective CEO than he was before that. So in the handouts, we have the information from these 2 slides, and this comes straight from Positive Intelligence. Anne and I are certified coaches, and we get access to quite a bit of good information we can share. But you can see the feelings that drive a stickler, the thoughts they have, the justification lies that keeps us using these even when they're not being effective and we know it's not working, and how they affect others is what's the information. And then you've got the same information for controllers, our little character using the puppet strings there. So that's in your handouts. And Anne, do you want to take over and just talk a little bit about, these saboteurs and then into the accept or convert?
Sure. So the saboteurs are ways they're ineffective. There's no such thing as a good saboteur, even as it's associated with a particular strength. So we use the visual of a hamster kind of just going on the wheel and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. And, it just leads to emotional angst and using these maladaptive strategies that don't get you anywhere. So the acceptor convert way of being is we sort of have a default. Our default is to go to judgment, like this is awful. Now I got to control this. Here they go again. They suck, and now why can't I get anything out of them? You see that sort of spinning and anger and angst that really doesn't get you anywhere at the end of the day. So that's the judge default mode. So what we're offering up today, and what positive intelligence talks about, is this thing called acceptor convert. So what is meant by acceptor convert is anything that you encounter can be converted to a gift and opportunity, either the gift of knowledge, the gift of inspiration, or the gift of power. So in other words, we can get something out of this if we're able to step away from that hamster wheel and decide we're going to convert. Now, there are times when we are not going to accept, because you can't convert. You can't convert everything to a gift and opportunity. You'd be constantly doing that. You pick the ones that matter the most and you convert. The other thing, though, is accepting, saying, okay, for instance, I'm in traffic. I can't do anything about it. And you can either convert it, like I'm going to just listen to this podcast, or if that's not available to you, you just accept it. You just, okay, I accept it. Now, accepting doesn't mean you're going to just put up with it. It just means you're shelving it so you can put your energies elsewhere. That's what the accept is. So you have the default, which is judge. Oh my God, this is awful. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with the situation. Spin, spin, spin. Or your other two options are accept it. I'm going to let it go. I don't have the energy. Or I'm going to shelve it for later, or convert it into one of the gifts and opportunities. So, same.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Yeah, these are almost like the safe ones we start talking about with clients, like Anne mentioned, getting caught in traffic, or you get bugged by someone well, and they have the same little quirk that they do over and over. They're not going to change, and you can either accept that quirk or somehow turn it into a gift. Same thing at work. People who grumble about the weather when they can't do anything about that, or you've got a physical problem and you're not going to get rid of it. So what are you going to do? So you can think of, these are common ways to just help people think about it. So you've got two options, as Anne was talking about. You can accept it and have peace with it. And again, it's not resignation or denial, but empowerment to move on. Okay, this is the way it is. Now what am I going to do? Accepting it. Or you can convert it, as she was saying. This was a sign I saw in England, just having fun with weeds. Weeds for sale. Pick your own. So I don't like something, I'm going to find the humor in it. So you can, again, like Anne said, what might you learn? What strength might you develop? And she's going to give some examples, and what action might you take? But the problem is, and I'm going to turn it back to Anne.
Yes. So the problem is that we often do fall into judge mode. Now, what is meant by that is you do want to discern. If something is not going well, you don't want to pretend it's not going well. That would be an avoider tendency. But once you've determined something is not going well, you don't want to keep your hand on the hot stove and bask in misery. You want, when you're in negative emotions of being frustrated, angry, bitter, you find yourself blaming either yourself or circumstances or other people, then your hand is on the hot stove and it's really not getting you anywhere. And meanwhile, the people around you get disrupted by this. So discern what needs to be fixed or changed, but don't keep your hand on the hot stove. So the 10-second accept or convert strategy. So you decide that you're going to either convert it to a gift and opportunity, or you're going to accept. And what the 10-second accept is you're literally going to tense up your body for 10 seconds and let it go. And say, I accept. And then you move on.
And
So
Shirzad really emphasizes you need to do something with your body. You just can't say, I accept this traffic. You have to feel it in your body. So maybe you form fists on the steering wheel and press for 10 seconds and then go, that's it. I'm done with it. I'm accepting that I'm in traffic and I'm going to deal with it. No more anger, road rage, anything else. So that's accept.
Yes. And it's an embodied experience, as you said. Or you talk about what one of those gifts might be. Like, I'm having that argument again with my husband. I can either accept it for 10 seconds or I can say to myself, the gift and opportunity is I'm developing patience. But staying in that judge mode of, oh, that jerk, oh, crying out loud, I should have been a nun or whatever, is what takes us down from the perspective of emotional intelligence and positive intelligence. So yes, so the gift of knowledge, what are the lessons that I can learn from this? What have I learned about what sets somebody off and what can I do differently, for instance? But whatever those gifts of knowledge are, or another common gift is the gift of strength. So whatever kills me will make me stronger. Will I, if I endure this, will I come out of it more confident? Will I be more patient? So you get a gift of strength and you identify that. You say, this is why I'm hanging in there. This is why I'm not spinning my wheels, is because I'm going for this gift. And then the third one is the gift of action. So you're asking yourself, okay, what is it that I'm willing to take bold action on? Am I going to take some action? And it doesn't have, one of the things here is you're going to be identifying the step that you're willing to take. So it's not like a, big gift, go big, go big or go home. You're going to look at that gift and you're going to say, so here's my first step. And you take that step.
And so it could be like you get frustrated with someone at work and your gift of action is, that means I'm taking a 5-minute walk after this meeting. And that'll get a little bit of my exercise in, clear my brain, and I'm, taking action, getting rid of those negative feelings by doing this. It doesn't have to be quite related. Or it could be, I'm going to drop this frustration and take a good note here or, write a pep talk to myself because I'm staying calm in this meeting. That's my action.
So we're going to look at in these breakout rooms, how if Steve Jobs was applying that mindset of accept or convert, how he may have been an effective leader minus the saboteur sauce that really made it difficult to work for him, and even sabotaged his own life as well. So that's what we'll be looking at. So
do you want to talk about? Yeah.
Sure, I was good. So for instance, Steve Jobs was known to have some food peculiarities to the point where, let's imagine him going to a restaurant and he can't find anything at all on the menu because he's so specific about what he can and he cannot eat, for instance. What would it look like if he could accept or convert rather than be miserable or make everybody get up and leave, for instance? That's one of our breakout rooms, Steve and his food peculiarities. Okay.
Yeah, and on his food peculiarities, I mean, it could have been as simple as I have to eat this now because it was served, but when I get home, I'll do my normal raw steak and tomato juice or whatever it was he always ate. I mean, actually, he was vegan, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Or for instance, maybe the gift is I might like this and I'll expand this into my menu, my day-to-day menu. Could be another gift of knowledge.
Yep. I'll find out for sure if this should be in my list. That's another good one.
Yeah. So as we go into these breakout rooms, these are the three things. I'm in Florida, so I'm just I'm half on the beach and half in here.
So Sue, I think we'll just do two breakout rooms, the Steve's battle with cancer and his battle with leadership, and that way we can have a group of two and a group of three. And what we want is for you to just be able to explore this. In the packet, we separated the information into the categories, so you can just read a little bit about Steve's long battle with cancer that, of course, did take his life at an early age, and then some things about his. The one group will do that, and one group will look at what it says about Steve as a leader. And when you looked at that, think about how he could have used accept or convert with something that went on. How could that have helped him? Either the 10-second, this is the way it is, and I have to accept it, and I'm going to, or how can I develop, use a gift of knowledge or a gift of strength or a gift of action to actually grow from this thing that's irritating me so much as a stickler or as a controller. You can focus on either one of these. So we're hoping that we're going to give you about 10 minutes to talk about, you can talk a little bit about, his NT personality and how that shows up in the notes that you have, how a stickler or controller amplified those blind spots, and what you see in the readings for your section. And then any other comments you have about his struggles. But then how could he have used accept or convert? So you can also obviously get into your own personal what saboteurs you might have and how that might work out. But we just hope you can explore this 10-second accept or convert that our clients have found so useful. Apply it to Steve while you're thinking about yourself, and we'll gather again in 10 minutes to see what you've come up with and do a little debrief.
So we've got, there's only 7 of us. So I've actually put, Jane, I've put you in one room and I've put Anne, you in another room. So they're just breakout rooms 1 and 2. So for your breakout room 1, do you want to handle the topic of Steve Jobs and the cancer diagnosis and stay room 2, the leadership? Steve, as leader, is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah. And I think Anne and I'll stay out for a bit because we want you free to get questions ready and just explore this together, and then we'll click in a couple minutes.
All right, and there's 10 minutes, folks, and then we'll come back. So hopefully this will all go well. Let me just stop recording as well. Ooh. Excellent. Thanks everyone. I hope you had a good talk at the breakout rooms. Back over to you, Jane and Anne.
So I don't want to summarize what went on in our room. So
yeah.
John, I loved your comment. The cancer one is a difficult one to just jump in and do, and yet it really applies because he did not accept nor convert, and it killed him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's arguable that he eventually did try to get out of that hamster wheel in some ways, but it was too late.
Yeah, he learned his lesson. Yeah, if you look at the end of the cancer story versus the beginning, but I've gone through cancer and counseled people, and the gift of action can be as simple as I am going to be patient and pleasant with every medical person I interact with, and that is your commitment to yourself, and it helps you convert. It doesn't have to be this huge thing, or I'm going to accept that I have no control. This I cannot control. It's a huge thing, even though it seems simple, and you might have to tell yourself 100 times. But there are these accept or convert principles that if you go down to the basics, really apply even to something that messy.
I found it actually a relief because I think that in our room we had to talk about cancer, and we often have friends and our family members that we have to talk to convince them to deal with something like a real, serious health issue. And we've seen this in people we know. So I thought it was like practicing talking to them, and it was a relief to do it as a group.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to also mention that the saboteurs tend to come out in times of high stress. People are tired, people are frightened. Those tend to be the triggers that bring out these saboteurs. And so certainly cancer would be a huge trigger for saboteur type conversations and saboteur behavior.
And it really, when I guide people recently diagnosed, I never have them take the saboteur inventory, but I'm listening. Are they avoiding news? Are they poor me, even though they've gotten cancer randomly? And I'm just listening for what's going on. Are they trying to please everybody else? And is that getting in the way of their own healing? And then I can ask different coaching questions. So just like type can help if you know what their type is and know what stresses them in great times of need. This is just another layer that can help you not say anything that's totally different from what well, you're still going to make mistakes when you talk to people, but at least can help you have a better first guess. But
yeah, it's something that they can certainly use right away once you become aware of how powerful it is to use the model.
I think it's interesting that, potentially as a hyperachiever who's going through that kind of thing, whatever you're going through, you need to do well. So you even need to be sick well. You need to do this sickness thing as well as you can. And so that's kind of when that saboteur comes to get you. Say, well, actually, you don't need to do it. You don't need to be being sick.
And you may not be able to.
Yeah.
So I remember just as an example of that, and this is where it can be helpful. One of my close colleagues had cancer shortly before me, and I knew she'd run a 10-mile race, partway through her chemo treatment. And there's a piece because I'm a hyperachiever too. There's a piece of me in the back of my mind going, well, if Beth can do that, so can I. And I remember my doctor actually saying, this whole thing is a marathon, not a sprint. And you can't count on anything. You've got to, pace yourself all along. And that was the exact, she knew me, my physician knew me. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to have control over, to set a goal like running a half marathon during cancer treatment is like the dumbest thing you can do. Because you won't have control over whether you can do that.
Yeah.
Nor is it what you should be concentrating on. Jerry? Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
No. I mean, no. Well, I think just this part of the conversation just making me kind of realize as well that a lot of this is, well, I mean, it's all at another level, just about intentionality, isn't it? It's about being intentional in choosing your reaction rather than being driven by the saboteur or an unthinking reliance on your dominant function or whatever it might be. It's making a choice.
100%. That's the crux of it, to be honest.
Yep. Recognizing that your hand is on that hot stove and getting it off. And accept or convert, get it off. Am I going to accept this? Am I going to convert it? Am I going to, use a type strategy that I know, whatever it is? And we've only got a couple minutes, Anne, to talk from your group.
Okay, Jerry.
I was a group of my own until Anne joined me. So, and it was just interesting reflecting on the leadership thing. So the paper has 4 examples of difficult behavior that Job's evidenced. And I was just thinking, it was just interesting thinking about, well, in that situation, what could you do then differently to either accept the situation, or to turn it into something that was going to give you increased learning or strength, or something to do. So yeah, it was maybe a simpler task in a way, I think, in that room than dealing with cancer. But yeah, I mean, I found it just a very helpful lens to reconnect with.
I think there's something about naming your hurdle, isn't there? And especially if you know what it is. And the recurring patterns in saboteurs are similar to the recurring patterns in type. You kind of know your blind spots, and then you can kind of manage them in advance, or at least give them some thought. If you're a stickler, you like let go of something, and then it will be better for you. Or I found it such a helpful lens, I have to say.
I was going to say that the term they use is preempt the saboteur. So if you kind of know what it might look like, when you, in fact, when I had a detached retina and the avoider was telling me I was going to be just fine. Nah, it's going to go away. It's, and I was fine. That's the avoider. You get to the doctor right now.
Yeah.
But the avoider was telling me, nope, it's going to pass. No problem.
Yeah. I think when I looked into it, they talked about giving whatever your saboteur is a name. It's like, oh, here comes Betty. And it's like I've just bumped into her around the corner, and she's come again, and she's out to get me. But I'm just going to make friends with Betty.
Yeah.
That kind of thing that sort of gave you a visual that was helpful.
Yeah. Very.
Do you find that serious health issues, are when the saboteurs come out at their worst?
Oh yeah.
Well, any major crisis. So during the pandemic, Ann and I were coaching several people, and the saboteurs were all over the place. And there was talk about, in the pandemic, among the coaches, who has the biggest problem? Is it a hypervigilant? Is it a avoider who can't avoid it at all? Is it someone who's trying to control everything? And of course, not, what did you have control over during lockdown? Sue chose to control her life by calling me once a week, putting her stake. It was the convert thing. We had a gift of discourse between the two of us that we've never duplicated, other than during lockdown, that I treasure looking back on. So, but you think of these big crises, any stress will bring them out. And then some people use them all the time because they don't realize how problematic they are.
Yeah.
We've got to our time, so I'm going to officially close the session and then stop the recording, but we can carry on chatting for a wee bit afterwards. But thank you so much, Jane and Anne. It's always a pleasure to have you with us at BAPT, and we're honoured that you're here with us, and great for us all to get our heads around this really different and I think an amazing perspective that we can add to complement our use of type, because there's so many layers to this personality thing, isn't there? And the more layers we have, the more we get this sort of wonderful self-understanding that we're all after, and hopefully some growth. So thank you so much. I'll stop the recording, and thanks to everyone.